for those of you who are coming next week to my house, which I think is just Ella and Red, which is fine, we will have a nice small class. I told you had to binge read. That's not really true. I organized, see, everything is messed up because I got sick that week. I ruined everything. My husband did this to me. But we're finishing Eagle of the Night for next week. I divided up in 3 instead of 4. I forgot I did this. So you would normally just finish the Eagle of the Night for next week anyway. If you can, read all the rest of the Dorothy Mills book. If you can't, don't sweat it, all right? Just come and we'll talk about it anyway. It doesn't matter, all right? If you told me you can't come and then you suddenly decide you can, just come. Fine. I'm just going to be there with Rhett and Ella. And Rhett and Ella's moms, just hanging out. But if you can't, don't worry. So if you want, you could just stop class today, but then you'll never hear about the fall of the Roman Empire. That's so sad. So I have 2 more classes, and they'll be on YouTube. And if you want to read and you can watch them, you know what? You won't get in trouble if you watch them and don't read. If I have a paper of yours, I will try to get it scanned and give it back to you. But it's up to you and your mom. You know, if you want to watch the videos and just kind of finish it out. But I thought about crowding it all. There's no way we can do all of that 3 weeks worth in 1 week. So we're not going to try. We're just going to do what I would normally do this week. But you guys, we could hopefully finish it up. And the final reading of the year is something like 10 pages. It's not, not a big reading. Sort of just wrap up. Okay, so with that, let's look at our reading questions on page 59. And I am not so in love with these emperors as I am with the emperors from last week, so I can't just wander around and talk like I did last week in my favorite week. But you guys read about 5 emperors: Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. These guys are known as the 5 good emperors. Not necessarily because they were morally good, although one of them, we will talk about this, but it's because they were good leaders. They weren't Neros, they weren't Caligula, right? They were good administrators, they were fair, they were basically, they were Augustus. Although Augustus it was hard for him because he had to figure out how to make this new government work. By the time we get to Nerva, the government's already working, right? So the first of these emperors is Nerva, and he just didn't really get much done because he was only there 2 years. But let me read the beginning of what Dorothy Mills says. As soon as the Senate heard of the assassination of Domitian, they met and appointed his successor. Listen to what they did. The Senate picked someone. The armies didn't say, make my general emperor. And nobody just came in and with an army and took over. The Senate said, who should we choose? Let's choose Nerva. And because he's older and wiser and he will do a good job. And unfortunately, he only had a couple of years, but he did do a good job. It was kind of a mess. Domitian was sort of a power-hungry egomaniac, a little bit. If you call yourself Lord and God, I'll do something about that person. And so Nerva was not like that at all. But he died. And then he had chosen Trajan. Do you remember how Augustus adopted Tiberius? But he was a family member, right? Because he was just looking around for family members. These 5 emperors did something. They adopted someone, and it wasn't necessarily someone in their family. Just someone who would be good to be next. Not my son, necessarily, just because he's my kid, but somebody who seems to have the savvy and have what it takes to be the next emperor. So he had chosen Trajan. Okay, this is the first question I asked you. What is brand new about Trajan becoming emperor? Yeah, because where was Trajan from? Trajan was from Spain. Yes. Vespasian was Italian, if you remember. He was the first emperor that wasn't from Rome. Trajan's not even from Italy, for crying out loud. Any boy can grow up to be emperor. That's not totally accurate, but it doesn't matter where you're from anymore. Trajan, okay, let me hit this. What milestone was reached for the empire under Trajan? Something happened in the empire. I haven't closed my book. The Roman Empire reached its greatest extent under Trajan. The empire's not going to get any bigger. So I brought my map back. One last hurrah for my map. The yellow. This is the empire at its greatest extent. Oh, I didn't get to show that animated map to you guys last week, did I? Okay, if maybe we'll stop early enough and I can show it to you. It's very cool. If not, I'll try to remember to send you guys one. Okay. 2/3, half to 2/3 of Britain, all the way down to the desert. All of this is under Trajan, and Trajan said, you know what, this is big enough. This is big enough, and maybe we need to just hold what we've got. So they talk a lot in Roman history books about the Rhine River and the Danube River. So this is the Rhine and the Danube. You know the waltz, the blue Danube waltz. We'll try to hum it. This is the border. This side is Germans and other barbarians. This is Rome. And we need to station soldiers all along this and just hold the line. And in the 100s that we're reading about today, the 2nd century, they could do this. By the 3rd century, they can't do this anymore. They can't hold the line anymore. And it starts to shrink. Because all these tribes keep pouring over the borders. So Trajan is the guy that I told you is reputed to be morally good, as well as a good administrator. So Dorothy Mills didn't tell you the story. But supposedly, Trajan was once on his horse getting ready to ride out to battle. And an old lady, a widow lady, came and she's grabbing him and grabbing his horse and saying, give me justice. You know, I'm being oppressed. Come hear my case and give me justice. And Trajan said, well, you know, kind of leaving for a war right now. Maybe I can deal with this when I get back. And she said, what if you don't come back? And the story is that he got down off his horse and went and found out what this woman's problem was and dealt with it. Because he cared. I do not have any idea. Probably she was being financially oppressed. Maybe she owed money or unfairly was told that she owed money. You know. That's a really good question. So Trajan got the reputation of being really great guy. So much so that as time passed, and you know, after he had died, but people were remembering him. The early church got the idea that if Trajan had had a chance and he had heard the gospel, he would have become a Christian. But as far as we know, he didn't. Here. So Pope Gregory, this is in the 500s. Just telling you the story. You can take it or leave it. Supposedly felt so moved by the Emperor Trajan and his virtue that he prayed to God to somehow that Trajan might get to hear the gospel and that Trajan was sent back to him, his spirit, whatever, and that Pope Gregory witnessed to him and he became a Christian. I said, you can take it or leave it. I don't personally like to tell God he can't do things, but in the poem that I keep talking about the Divine Comedy, the major poem of the Middle Ages. Trajan is in heaven because of this episode. He gets to be with the saints. But it gives you an idea of how they felt about Trajan. He's a really, really good guy. And he was just this close to being a Christian if he had just gotten to hear the gospel. Yes.
So this is after the
Yes.
Christians were in Rome.
Yes.
How do you not?
Well, because Christians didn't really run in the same circles often as the emperor and his household, although Paul does greet some from the emperor's household in his letters. But that doesn't mean that the emperor himself heard it. It's not like today where there's a church on every street corner, and religious broadcasting and things like that. Also, remember, it was not legal technically to be a Christian. And so if you were going to witness to him, you were going to take your life in your hands. Does that make sense? You might be a little shy about outing yourself to the emperor. Now, there's something else about Trajan. So Brett, I sound like, it's going to sound like I'm contradicting myself. He knew that Christianity existed. Do you see the difference?
Yeah.
He did not know the gospel.
Yeah.
He did not know who Jesus supposedly is and what he has done. Because we also have letters from Trajan to a man that we met last week. Last week when we had a painfully short visit to Pompeii, we talked about two guys named Pliny.
Yeah.
Uncle Pliny and Nephew Pliny. And Uncle Pliny was the admiral of the fleet across the bay, and he died trying to get people out. He was overcome by the gas and the smoke, and then he died. Nephew Pliny was across the bay. He didn't want to go because he was reading a good book. Books can save your life. That's the moral of the story. And they barely got out. He said it was pitch black. Pliny, the nephew, went on to also become an author, like his uncle, and a government official. And he was a provincial governor under Trajan. And we have letters that they wrote back and forth. We have tons of letters that Pliny wrote. Pliny told in a letter the story of that day when Vesuvius erupted and how we know so much. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but let me read you a little bit. This is what Pliny wrote to Trajan. It is my practice, my lord, to refer to you all matters concerning which I am in doubt. For who can better give guidance to my hesitation or inform my ignorance? I have never before participated in trials of Christians, so I do not know what offenses are to be punished or investigated, or to what extent. And I have been not a little hesitant as to whether there should be any distinction on account of age, or no difference recognized between the very young and the more mature. As Christians, do we punish little kids the same as their parents? Do we punish old people? What do I do about these guys? And he's writing to Trajan for advice. He said, here's what I did. I interrogated them as to whether they were Christians. Those who confessed, I interrogated a second and third time, threatening them with punishment. Those who persisted, I ordered executed. And here's his reason, and I love it. For I had no doubt that whatever the nature of their creed, stubbornness and inflexible obstinacy surely deserve to be punished. I don't punish them because they're not stubborn. I don't know if they do anything wrong, but they're just so stubborn. There were others possessed of the same folly, but because they were Roman citizens, I signed an order for them to be transferred to Rome, just like the Apostle Paul did. But he said, so he questions them, and here's what they say. They asserted that the sum and substance of their fault or error had been that they were accustomed to meet on a fixed day, Sunday, before dawn, and sing responsibly a hymn to Christ as to a God, and to bind themselves by oath not to do some crime, but not to commit fraud, theft, or adultery, not falsify their trust, nor to refuse to return a trust when called upon to do so. When this was over, It was their custom to depart and to assemble again to partake of food, but ordinary and innocent food. You might wonder, why ordinary and innocent food? Here's the problem. In the early church, you weren't allowed to be at communion unless you were a baptized believer. There are no visitors to these churches. And even today, you know, the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, they have a very ancient liturgy. And it's divided into two parts. You have the part that, what we call the sermon and the singing, and then communion is the second half. And everybody would leave. Everybody who wasn't baptized would leave for the second half. You can hear the sermon, but you can't see communion. And in the Orthodox Church today, they still have a part of the liturgy where they say, the doors, let us attend. Because they use a liturgy that was written in about the year 400. They've been saying the same words for 1600 years. The doors. And they say this because this is the time when everybody has to leave. If you're just a learner, it's called catechumen. They still say that. The doors, let us attend. No, they don't make you leave, though. They don't actually make you leave anymore. But it still remains in the liturgy, that marker, that, once upon a time, if you weren't a Christian, you couldn't be here. So, do you see how now what they do is a mystery to everybody? In fact, the Orthodox Church, they still say before communion, there's I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, who did come into the world to save sinners, to my chief. And I believe it's truly thine own precious body, and truly thine own precious blood. And they said, I will not speak of thy mystery to thy enemies. And so nobody knew what they did. And Christians weren't really talking because they thought they wouldn't understand. We're communing with the body and blood of Christ, and they're not going to try to explain this to non-believers. So rumors got around them because they heard people saying about eating body and blood. Those Christians are cannibals. I think those Christians are cannibals. Because they talk about eating body and blood. And so that's why he says, they eat food, but only innocent and ordinary food. They're not killing people and eating them. So Pliny finishes his letter. He says, Trajan, am I doing right? Am I doing wrong? Do you want me to change anything? And we have Trajan's letter back to him. We still have it. He says, you observed proper procedure, my dear Pliny, in sifting the cases of those who have been denounced as Christians. For it is not possible to lay down any general rule to serve the kind of fixed standard. They are not to be sought out. We're not going to go knocking on doors and say, is there any Christians in here? Let me search your house. They're not to be sought out. If they are denounced and proved guilty, they are to be punished. With this reservation, that whoever denies that he is a Christian and really proves it, that is by worshiping our God, even though he was under suspicion in the past, shall obtain pardon through repentance. But anonymously posted accusations ought to have no place in any prosecution. You can't just out your neighbor. No, we have actually 2 kids that I said we're going to be here are not here, so we have abundance.
So over the years, your guys, throughout the church, so you guys can take care.
No, he brought good junk for us.
Now, here's a trick for you guys. Appreciate you guys being a lot better than what this. But anyway, there's enough ice cream for all of you guys too. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You might have to let that ice cream thing
You know what?
set out for a while. So that's the jacket.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Everybody go around and take one. Yeah. So this is why Trajan gets part of the reputation is good. He's still okay in the persecution of Christians, but he says we're not going to seek him out. Does anybody care if I nibble on this while I talk? My throat is really dry. Oh yeah, Matthias didn't give a spoon. Does it have a spoon in it? Oh, okay. Is there enough there's way enough for Mom, too. There's plenty for Mom. All right. This is very unprofessional, but I mean, So that is Trajan. Trajan, while he was emperor, adopted Hadrian. Here, I'm not going to put this down, so I know all this. Hadrian was also one of these five emperors, and I know, I can go throw things away. I believe my next question is about Hadrian. How did Hadrian know what was going on in the various areas of the empire? Yeah, you can get something. Oh, but by the way, before we move on to Hadrian, I need to show you the pictures I brought. This is Trajan's column. Trajan, Dorothy Mills told you he was at war with the Dacians. Okay, here.
What's that called? Is he buried on there?
No, it's just a cool column. It's just it's a monument to his wars. And are you guys watching? It's spiraled. The whole column is spiraled with pictures of his campaigns. This is a close-up. I'll just bring it to you. This is a close-up of a river god rising up out of the water and the trees moving. The whole column is like that. But listen to this, guys. This column is 98 feet tall. Whoa. This column has a spiral staircase inside, so you can go to the top.
How important?
It's just one. But if you're going to river gods, Matthias, it's going to be a long story. So apparently you go up 185 steps. There's a statue of Trajan on top of it, and one of the ladies in the statue. And that is Peter. Peter is on top of the column of Trajan because. And this is still, I don't know if you can go in. It's material, I don't know how to define it. It's material, really much I'll fill you in if I was brave enough to do that or not. So this was my last thing about Hadrian. So Hadrian, here is our picture of Hadrian. Is there anything different about Hadrian's appearance? He does not have a perm, he just has naturally curly hair.
Why? Everyone had that.
What else? But you're close. Is it something about his facial appearance? His beard. He has a beard. None of the guys yet have had a beard. Hadrian had a fashion. Everybody had to have a beard. And the upcoming emperors are going to have a beard as well. So back to my question. How did Hadrian know what was going on in all parts of the empire? What did Hadrian do? This is the next question I asked you. This is very cool.
Was it the army?
It was not something with the army, although sometimes he traveled there. He traveled everywhere, was the answer I was looking for. He visited everywhere. And so he knew what was going on. Hadrian, and this is why I'm not supposed to teach it. Hadrian built the wall. Eagle of the Nine, they went north to Caledonia, right, looking for the eagle, and they crossed the wall. Hadrian's Wall, some of which is still standing. As a matter of fact, while I'm thinking of it, I'm doing things out of order today, but because it gives me stats on the wall, I will read our poem. It is Hadrian's Wall. In England, years and years ago, the Romans looked about. It really was a lovely place to live, without a doubt. But still the soldiers worried over danger from attacks. Soldiers in the military have to watch their backs. The soldiers said to Hadrian, the emperor of all Rome, we need some more protection here so we'll be safe at home. They said, a wall is what we need to set our minds at rest. A wall that's long and thick and strong to withstand every test. Said Hadrian, it's clear to me you're absolutely right. We need a wall to keep you safe when you're asleep at night. The structure that they built was very tall and very wide. It cut the country right in half. They viewed their work with pride. The wall went on for miles and miles, sturdy, strong, and stout. The soldiers then could sleep at night. Their foes were all kept out. And then below it says Hadrian's Wall, 73.5 miles long, 20 feet high, and 8 feet thick.
Whoa.
That's a wall.
That's a
That's a serious project.
That's twice the height.
So Hadrian built the wall that you encountered in Eagle of the Night that they passed through. And Hadrian also was very fond of building things. One thing he built in Rome, I have really bad pictures of this. I stole these off the internet. I'm sorry. The Pantheon. Pan means everything or all, and theos means God in Greek. Pantheon means all the gods. It wasn't a temple to one god, it was just a temple to the gods in general. And in the front, it has, it looks like a traditional temple, but can you see there's a round, kind of a round structure in the back? Can you see, kind of sticking out that? And it's a huge dome. It's a huge dome.
Did you see that?
No,
Or
it's
no,
in
you
Rome.
didn't. Oh.
My 40th anniversary was in 3 years ago. And my husband had said, but yeah, you can still live to this day. The Romans, these are all the Greek temples we looked at and rows and rows of columns. Have you ever been in a building where there's a big space that has columns in the middle of it? Sometimes basements have this. Sometimes, if your church has been converted from some other building, you have this nice big space, but it has columns in the middle, and you don't want to sit behind the column, right? Because you have to do this the whole time. So let's have an open space. The Greeks didn't really have huge open spaces. The Romans pioneered the use of concrete, which they could pour and make to be much lighter than marble or solid stone. And they would set up a framework and put the concrete over it, and they built concrete domes. And they don't need columns. It must have been amazing for the people that first came in this building. Gosh, they know the columns. I wonder if it made them nervous. The ceiling is going to fall down on me if there's no columns. I don't know. Hadrian also loved Athens, apparently, and just built tons of stuff in Athens. So I was here. Athens had a temple to Olympian Zeus, and they've been working on this thing for hundreds of years. It's really big. They just couldn't get it done because, the Persians attacked, then the Peloponnesian War, and then, of course, we can't stop fighting with each other, and we never get it done. So Hadrian came and he said, I am building the temple of Olympian Zeus. Great. And so you can visit it. Not much of it is standing still, just some of the columns. But it's not just a building. You go in through this archway, and it's a whole area. And there's shops and baths, and, it's a temple complex. And you go through, and on one side of the arch, the Athens side, it says, this is the city of Theseus, early king of Athens. But on the other side, the side of the temple he built, it says, this is the city of Hadrian. He wanted to make sure everybody knew he put that part in. They also found a library in Athens that he built. They've uncovered part of the mosaic floor of a beautiful library. Well, I think that they already knew that it was there. It's not like Pompeii, where they didn't even know it was there. Maybe they didn't know quite where it was. And of course, when a city gets lived in for 3,000 years, stuff gets buried, but you kind of know where it is. Does that make sense? So I don't know. I don't know if they dug specifically for it, or when they found that they knew what it was. That's a good question, though. So Hadrian, another one of these good emperors, he did good for the empire, and he followed Trajan's lead of we're going to hold the line. We're not going to invade new territory. We're going to try to keep those crazy British from the north out of our business with my wall. But other than that, we're just going to try to protect what we've got. When Hadrian died, the next emperor was named Antoninus Pius. Do you remember another person that we've talked about this semester who was pious? It might not have been in the book that we read, but I told you over and over that they called him always pious. He did things like carry his old dad on his back out of a burning city. Aeneas. In the Aeneid, he's always called pious Aeneas, God-fearing.
Oh,
He
yeah.
does his duty. Antoninus gets to be pious. And he did hear the gospel. But apparently it did not click with him.
Well, one person right here.
His problem was, Jesse, that he was just into all the gods. He had his own little shrine, and he sort of collected gods. And the problem, you gotta understand, the Romans, it was so hard for them to understand, what do you mean there's just one? I have to pick one? Can't your Jesus just join my collection?
It's like
No,
Pokemon.
can't. So let's do it. So, in the reign of Antoninus Pius, and the young man that he adopted, Marcus Aurelius, there was a young man named Justin. And he lived in the east, he lived in Samaria. He was a Samaritan. And he was also a philosopher. He studied all the philosophies of the time. And they say one day he was walking along the coast there in Israel, let's say Israel, and he met a man. And you have to know for this story that philosophers used to wear a particular type of clothing. They had something called the philosopher's robe, much like, I don't know, professors don't do it anymore, but they used to. Like college professors would have a particular robe, and they still do for graduation ceremonies and things. They have special clothes they wear. Yeah, a judge, exactly. So Justin was wearing his philosopher robe. So the man knew he was a philosopher. When he approached him and he said, "So I see you're a philosopher." "Yes, I am." "Have you ever," he asked him, "read the Hebrew scriptures?" And Justin says, "No, I'm not." So he said, any philosopher really ought to check this out, because, they say God wrote it. They say God gave it to them. Justin said, "Okay, check it out." And he did. And then he starts checking out. And remember, at this point, there is no New Testament. They haven't decided what books should be in the New Testament yet. They're still deciding. But there are letters circulating, right? So I might have a collection of some of the letters of Paul. And I get hold of it. So he did, and he read them, and he became a Christian. He wrote,
In the Old Testament too.
what?
In the Old Testament too.
Hebrew. Right? You said Hebrew?
Yeah,
Yeah. the Hebrew.
yeah. So he said the letter, so the Old Testament. So actually, if you ever think about this, whenever in the New Testament it says the scriptures say, it means the Old Testament. I mean, for us now, it means the whole thing. But when he wrote that, when Paul said in the scriptures, he means the Old Testament. There is no New Testament. They didn't actually decide for 300 years exactly what books should be in
But
the
they were discussing it at this point?
Yeah. And they were reading them in churches. And so they just kind of chose, sometimes based on what they were actually already reading in church. It's almost been reading in the past. Anyway, that's the side of it. Justin read these, and he became a Christian, and he started writing. And he wrote a dialogue with a Jew and a Christian, kind of talking back and forth about prophecy. But here's the one that interests us. He wrote an apology. And remember, this doesn't mean I'm sorry for them. It means what we mean when we say apologetics, making a defense. Apologiamai is the Greek word for make a defense of yourself, defend yourself. So he wrote an apology, and it was addressed to Antoninus Pius and Marcus Aurelius, his adopted son. Problem: we can't prove they ever read it. We can't prove they ever read it. What? Probably. But they might have. It was addressed to them, and it was a defense. And Justin tells us it gives us the earliest description we have of a church service. What do? Sounds very much like Pliny described to Trajan, but in a little more detail. Justin, however, is known to us as Justin Martyr. So that pretty much tells you the end of his story right there. Justin was informed upon by someone he beat in a debate, who was kind of ticked off, and informed him as a Christian, and he was executed. So that was under Antoninus Pius. Antoninus Pius died, and his adopted son, Marcus Aurelius, became emperor. This is Marcus Aurelius. He also has a beard and curly hair. This statue is one of the few statues we have of an emperor on a horse. And so the early Christians destroyed a lot of statues of the emperor because they were pagan. But they kept this one, and it's kind of really thought it was Constantine. But it's too late now. We're not destroying statues anymore. So it got saved. Marcus Aurelius, I feel so sorry for him. Here's why. All the guy wanted to do was be in his study and read and write books. I understand Marcus Aurelius. You just want your cup of tea, and you don't want the phone to ring, and you want to be left alone. You want to read your book. This is what he wanted. But unfortunately, he was made emperor and spent almost his entire reign in the field holding those orders. Spent most of his reign in an army camp. This group is a little young, but sometimes I run into ones that have. The movie Gladiator. Marcus Aurelius is the emperor. When he and Russell Crowe, whose name in the movie I don't know. Max, thank you. It's been a while. When they're in the army camp together, that man is Marcus Aurelius that he's talking to. I'm sure are. Yeah, I close my eyes. My sons monitor movies. I've told you this. Like, Mom, there's a part where you're gonna want to close your eyes. Okay. And I do. I always obey. No, the minute they step into the arena, I'm like, yeah, checking out. Till people just start talking again, and then I'll open my eyes. So Marcus Aurelius was the closest, maybe, the world ever came to what Plato called a philosopher king. Plato wrote a book called The Republic, and he said, he had Socrates say in this, you know, until kings become philosophers, or philosophers become kings, nothing is going to go well in the world. Well, Marcus Aurelius was basically king, and he was like a philosopher. And here's some marvelous things. In those army camp tents, he wrote a book of philosophy. At night, when do you have time to do this? I don't know. He wrote a book called The Meditations. What another one. They're going to just not justify us. But make sure to throw everything away because we're being rewarded for being so neat and tidy. So we don't want to just trash the place on the last day. So he wrote a book called The Meditations. And we still have it. I'm going to read you a few excerpts. It's not got a plot. It's not a novel. It's like Proverbs. It's observations, wise observations. Some of them are pretty darn good, though. And this is a revered book among the philosophers called Stoics. And this is actually the next section you read, but let's talk about it. Shoot, I blew that up. What was Marcus Aurelius' greatest love? What? Philosophy, okay. And what did the Stoics believe to be the highest good, and how did they pursue it? We actually talked about this already, because we met a character in Julius Caesar that was a Stoic. Yes. Yes, what did you say, Matthias? Mm-hmm. But virtue is true. But virtue for them, that's not a very helpful answer. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah.
Be virtuous? Well, you need to give me some more information. What do you mean by that? Virtue for them is calming your soul to the point where you're detached enough from things that happen that it doesn't crush you when things go bad. They believe that God or the gods ordered the world. They weren't down involved in the affairs of men so much. But you wanted to be more like the gods and dispassionate. So when Brutus finds out that Portia has died, you remember? It's kind of weird. Oh, so Portia's dead. All right, well, get out the maps. Let's plan the military campaign. But that was stoic of him. The Romans loved the Stoics because it matched their do your duty, work hard, be tough ethic, So Marcus Aurelius is one of the most famous of the Stoic philosophers. And here are some of his meditations. He says, though you should be going to live 3,000 years, and as many times 10,000 years, still remember that no man loses any other life than this which he now lives, nor lives any other than this which he now loses. For the present is the only thing of which a man can be proud. So when we see somebody a child that dies, okay, it seems sadder than when an old person dies. Not that we miss them, the old person must, but it's not unexpected. Do you know what I mean? And you say, well, they lived 70, 80, 90, 100 years, and they had a good life. They had a good run. But when it's a young person, you say, oh, they barely got to live. Marcus Aurelius says, that's messed up. Don't think of it that way. All you have is this moment. And the 5-year-old and the 90-year-old are deprived of the next moment. That's it. You only get one life, and if you think about it, 70, 80, 90 years isn't very long compared to thousands of years, If you get to live an extra 10 or 20 years, kind of a drop in the bucket. I'm not saying we shouldn't praise God and want to go to the doctor and, extend our lives for our loved ones. I'm not saying that at all. I'm telling you what Marcus Aurelius is saying. And there's actually some sense in it that, it says in the Bible, teach us to number our days aright. Right? Give us a realistic look at what a lifetime really is. It's not that long. It goes faster than you expect. So this was one of his meditations. He said, how much trouble, this is a good one, and I feel like Christians can get on board with this one. How much trouble he avoids, who does not look to see what his neighbor says, or does, or thinks, but only to what he does himself, that it may be just and pure. Or, as Agathon says, look not around at the depraved morals of others, but run straight along the line without deviating from it. This reminds me very much of, you're trying to take the speck out of your brother's eye, but got a plank hanging out of your own. Once you deal with your own stuff before you try to tell other people how to clean up their act. It's not a direct quote. This is Ferguson paraphrase. The best way of avenging yourself is to not become like the wrongdoer. I don't know that we want to call it avenging ourselves. He says, you want to get real revenge? Don't be like them. Be better than that. Don't retaliate. Think not so much of what you have, of what you have not, as of what you have. Think more about what you have than what you don't have. But of the things which you have, select the best. Everybody do it. Imagine right now the thing you treasure the most. It could be a material possession, it could be a human being. Now, reflect how eagerly it would have been sought if you didn't have it. That thing you're imagining, think how hard you worked to get that thing. You already have it! Congratulations! At the same time, however, take care that you do not, through being so pleased with it, accustom yourself to overvalue it so as to be disturbed if you should ever not have it. Right? Appreciate, give thanks that you have whatever it is that you value, but if you lose it someday, don't be so wrapped up in it that it's going to crush you. All right, one more. What a soul that is, which is ready, if at any moment it must be separated from the body, and ready either to be extinguished or dispersed or continue to exist. So you got to be, what a soul that is that's ready to die, whatever that means, whether you're extinguished or dispersed or continue to exist, because he doesn't know. But so that this readiness comes from a man's own judgment, not from mere obstinacy like the Christians, but considerately and in dignity and in a way to persuade another without tragic show. Great Marcus Aurelius didn't understand that if he asked the Christians, they would say they were doing this with from their own judgment. They were making a conscious decision, and it was with dignity, and it did persuade others. He didn't know. He only knew what people told him about the Christians. Right. It is Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius, super smart guy, philosopher, made a horrible mistake. And it was, he let his son be emperor after him, which is most of the movie Gladiator, right? Commodus, who did go out and like to fight, in the Gladiator ring. Of course, he always wins because it's rigged. Kind of like Nero being out on stage. He was terrible. Commodus was a terrible emperor. And Commodus sets the stage for a slide that's going to take a couple hundred years, really, to bear fruit. But after Commodus, for a long, long time, we never get another emperor that is really worth it. But this was the highlight. This was the heyday, the golden age of the Roman Empire. These 5 good emperors.
How many years?
Here, let's look and see what Marcus Aurelius' dates are. Because we're starting about 96 to 180. Almost 100 years. Almost the entire 2nd century. But then when we get to the 3rd century, things start unraveling. And the 4th is even worse, and the 5th is a disaster. Okay. We talked about the Stoics. I also had you read that section on philosophy. Tell me about the Epicureans. What's their deal? What do they think is the greatest good? The Epicurean said that the highest good was to be found in happiness. Happiness. Now, that sounds pretty good. Who doesn't want to be happy? I want to be happy. But the Epicurean idea of happiness was to live wisely, temperately, and uprightly, a simple life. All right. But his teaching was dangerous, Epicurus. It gave opportunity to the self-indulgent to become more so, and it encouraged the making of oneself and one's own pleasure, the beginning and end of all things. You know what makes me happy? The ice cream. I think I'll have more. What makes me happy? Putting my feet up and getting a bag of chips and binge watching Netflix. And that's what Epicureanism, that's the reputation it got, right? Because for most of us, frankly, unless we work at it, the things that make us happy, short term, aren't very constructive or good for us often. We all know this. I feel like we know this. We'd rather, most of us, me, how about I would rather sit around than exercise. So would rather sit around than exercise. That's not good for me, you know. But it makes me happy to sit around. So the Epicureans became known as the lovers of pleasure, that pleasure makes you happy. And they did say that, but they meant good friends, good conversation, you see, your children around you, things, wholesome pleasures. But to say what makes you happy is the greatest good, that's kind of dangerous because, like I said, for most of us, the things that make us happy for a little while aren't always good for us or something we should get into. So unfortunately, these two philosophies were competing in the Roman Empire. And because the Romans got tired of the fact that Jupiter and Juno and Apollo and Vesta and all these, they don't really do much for your heart or your soul. You go and you do the pinch of incense to Caesar and you say the little prayer. And maybe if you're super religious, you might bring an offering into the temple of Jupiter or something like that. But otherwise, it was just kind of what you did because you were a citizen. It was your duty. But there's no salvation. There's no peace. And so as time went on, the Romans started thinking, we don't really like our religion. It's okay, but it doesn't make me feel better. It doesn't make me a better person. I need something more. So they started looking east, and some of them became Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, who said, this is the answer. This is the answer. Or Epicureans. But even they found out, this doesn't really make me feel like I'm in touch with God. Just live my little life, and I do the right things. It might be a little boring, but I'm doing my duty still. So they started checking out some other religions. They started looking at Egypt. A lot of people started worshiping Isis. There was a big one in the east, Mithras, the sun god, was a Persian god. We met two worshippers of Mithras. Did you notice? Who's a worshiper of Mithras? You might have missed it. It was just kind of buried in there. Of course, I didn't mark it. I feel like it might be at the very beginning. If I don't find it really fast, I will tell you. I'm not going to find it. Do you think you know?
They weren't the ones, you said at the very beginning, but at the very beginning, it wasn't I keep thinking, I'm trying to remember, who were the people who attacked the Romans?
Oh, with Cradock and his crew?
Yeah.
They were a local tribe, and I don't know, I'm sure she gave us the name of the tribe, but I don't remember. It wasn't them. Marcus is a worshiper of Mithras. I'm sorry I didn't mark the places. Marcus even sets up, what?
Like the main character.
It talks about the fact that he has a brand on his forehead, because apparently if you get to a certain level of worshiper of Mithras, you get branded, for getting a tattoo or something. And he sets up an altar and prays to Mithras at one point. And he meets another one. Do you remember they went north and they met a guy who was whistling a Roman barracks song, Gurn? Marcus thought, he looks like some Celtic tribesman. But he went home with them and he looked at the guy's forehead. It was really faint, but he could see the Mithras scar. And he said, where would this Celtic tribesman hear about me? And then the guy looks up and he sees where a chin strap from a helmet had rubbed for years. He was a Roman soldier. That's how he got it. He was a Roman soldier, from whom he gets a lot of his information about the Knights Legion that we'll talk about in a minute. Mithras was a mystery religion. Greece had a mystery religion. It was the Eleusinian mysteries. They would go to the city of Eleusis, and it was forbidden dirt, and it was top secret. You know, unless you were being inducted into the mystery, just like the New Spears Festival, where the boys go into the cave, and nobody else is allowed to go into the cave, and nobody knows what happens in there. This was the same thing. No one was allowed to tell. In fact, once someone, a writer, gave a little more information than he was supposed to, and he got it. He just kind of let some things slip about the mysteries. Mithras, this was Leslie's mystery religion, where only the people who were in the religion got to go in and see and go through the initiation ceremony. And it offered communion with God. It offered peace. It's like a little cult, except it was more like what we would call a religion rather than a philosophy, right? Stoicism and Epicureanism, they're philosophies. They don't really speak to your heart. Mithras and Isis and the rest of these spoke to people's hearts. And it became very popular. But the biggest one is Christianity. And you might as well know this. A lot of people say, oh, look, Christianity is just like the Eleusinian mysteries and Mithras, and it's just the same thing. The dying God who comes back to life. Just because someone else has a story, does it mean it didn't really happen? I don't think so. But Christianity spread rapidly through the Roman world. First of all, among kind of the downtrodden, you know, slaves and orphans and widows and the poor people. A lot of those people lived in the cities. And you know, when you live in a city, rumor flies, right? If you live way out in the country in the middle of nowhere, you don't hear the news. But if you live in the city, you hear the latest news. And so these people became Christians. The people who lived in the country didn't hear about it. They didn't become Christians as fast. The Roman word for people who live in the country, pagani. Pagani, they're pagans. It literally just meant country people. But it was the country people who held on to Jupiter and Juno. And so it didn't take long, though, before the people who were not just the poor and the downtrodden were becoming Christians. And like I said, by the middle 2nd century, Justin Martyr is writing an apology for Christianity to the emperor himself. And she goes ahead and tells you, so I'll go ahead up to Constantine, although we're going to read about Constantine. A lot of you aren't. Some of you aren't. So I'm going to do the extra Constantine. Should I do the extra Constantine? Rhett and Ellie, you'll have to hear it twice. Maybe. You're okay with that. Christianity was persecuted, but not all the time. I think I told you last week. Sometimes there would be an uprising against the Christians, and they would come round them up, and then it would calm down again. A few emperors said, I hate them, and we're rounding them all up and killing them all. There was empire-wide persecution, but not most of the time. Most of the time, it was just some local group of people got ticked off with the Christians. Who knows what set it off? I have in my mind a picture of somebody going to the marketplace and some Christian snaps the last bag of apples that you wanted, and you're just, it's Christians, we're going to go after them. I don't know that ever happened. It wouldn't have to be something big. You know, people get angry with other people for stupid reasons sometimes. So they would get riled up, and they would go for the bishop. Go for the leader of the local church, the bishop. So they would go arrest the bishop. So we know of a couple of these cases. In around the year, like in the 90s or around the year 100, there was a bishop in Smyrna, and his name was Polycarp. And they arrested him. And they took him to the local arena. And they said, look, old man, you're old. We don't want to kill you. Just renounce Christ. And he said, 86 years I have walked with him. And how can I deny my Lord now? This man was at least 86 years old, if not more, depending on when he became a Christian. And then you have to understand something else about the Christians. Not only were they thought to be cannibals, but they were considered atheists. Did you know Christians are atheists? Didn't know that, did you? They're atheists because they don't worship the Roman gods. They're atheists. So they said, Polycarp, please, all you have to do is say, away with the atheists. And they say Polycarp looked down at the people in the arena, waiting to see if he was going to recant or be killed. And he put his hand in his forehead and he just went, away with the atheists. But he indicated all the people in the arena, they're the atheists. That did not win him any friends. So they tied him to a stake and piled wood around him to burn him to death. And we still have the account, the martyrdom of Polycarp. The story is that the flames poofed out around him and made a little room. It didn't touch him. Kind of like the fiery furnace, you know? And the spectators said that they smelled something that smelled like incense or baking bread. A lovely smell. Incense because prayers of the saints, baking bread because of the Eucharist. Like he's a Eucharistic sacrifice. What did you say, Jesse? Well, too late because they got tired of him not being burned. So a soldier came up, not sure how he made it through the fire, and stabbed him to death.
Wow.
And the blood put out the fire, they say. This was the end of Polycarp. Yeah. No. Jesse, he was only leaving that stadium one way, and he was being carried out. They didn't care what the fire did.
Why they kill him though?
I know, but he was snarky.
His hand got terrible.
He was being snarky. And so we know a lot about another one of these bishops. Ignatius was the bishop of Antioch. And some people in Antioch got ticked off. Don't know how it started. They wait for Ignatius. Ignatius they shipped to Rome. They took him to Rome. And I just wondered this. He's from Antioch. Why didn't he get on a boat there? Don't know, but they took him through Turkey. They took him through Asia Minor. And then they got on a boat and sent him to Rome. But he wrote letters. While he was traveling, he wrote letters to various churches. Many of the people on his route, you know, if I live 20 miles away, I send representatives from my church to go see Ignatius and wish him well, because I'm never going to see him again. They're taking him there to die. And pray with him. And so he wrote letters, and we have his letters that he wrote to all these people. He also knew Polycarp. And he wrote a letter to Rome, though. It's difficult to read, because it's just, he really wants to go and die. And he tells the Roman church, don't intercede for me. Don't stop it. I want this. I want to die for my Lord. And he said, I wish I had brought it with me. Come rending of limbs and cracking of bones. I am wheat for the Lord to be ground fine by the lion's teeth. They did. They took him to Rome and they killed him there. So these things would flare up. Gaul, in southern Gaul, there was a terrible wave of persecution. A woman named Perpetua and another one named Blandina just held up under persecution. Jaws were dropping. This women considered weaker, they just wouldn't die and wouldn't give up. One of them, they sewed into a skin ball and threw to a bull to be tossed around and gored. That's how she died. They were very creative.
Wait, what happened?
They sewed her inside like a leather bag to make a ball for a bull to toss around. And they tossed her and gored her until she was dead.
My favorite one is the iron, or iron bullet.
Oh, that wasn't Christians.
Yeah,
That was in Sicily. That was the bull of Polaris. Yes. Yeah, that's nasty. You know, people have been very creative in killing other people. I hate to say this, but you know this already. So this went on for 300 years. And at any point, your local church may be rounded up, and your bishop, your dad, your mom may be thrown to animals or set on fire or some other horrible creative torture. And then there was at some point along there, they split the empire in half. We'll be talking about this next week, but I'll give them this. An emperor came and he said the empire's too big. We're splitting it in half. We'll have two emperors. And one of these emperors was named Constantine. I won't tell the whole story of Constantine. I'll say something. Constantine conquered all his rivals and came to be sole emperor again. And he did something amazing. In 313, he issued an edict saying Christianity is now legal. There will be no more persecution of Christianity. There was a little more persecution later because of one of his successors, but for the most part, that ended it, yes.
I remember we talked about it, and then like, people weren't like, the Christians weren't disappointed, but it like, this is kind of when, this was just some like, even though what, like,
Yes.
Because then it's like that, but then it was just like, because then, didn't Constantine make it like, you have to be a Christian?
No. No one made it. Constantine this was 313. In the 380s, maybe Theodosius I, he said, Christianity is now the official religion of the empire,
Okay.
which isn't quite the same as saying you have to be, although obviously it's highly recommended at that point. But Constantine didn't do that. In fact, he let the pagans still worship in their pagan temples.
Yeah, because then it was like, you could get rid of the odds.
Yeah, see, and that's naturally. Okay, think about it. We would do this too. If the president is a football fan, if the president is a football fan, it might be hard for him not to just be partial and put people in his cabinet that share his interests. Do you know what I mean? And you might not even set out to do it. It's like, oh, we get along so well. We both love, I don't know any sports teams, but fill in the blank with your favorite team. And so I think it was like that. I don't think I don't think Constantine set out maybe to pack his cabinet with Christians to make people scramble to be Christians, but it's kind of human nature. If you really believe Christianity is true, I'm going to gravitate towards other people who are Christians, and any given person might realize that it is in my best advantage to become a Christian. Become a Christian.
Yeah, 'cause I remember, like I said, Christians were mad, or like, upset that it wasn't illegal anymore. It was just like, it wasn't true, or like, people didn't feel it.
Yes.
It wasn't as strong. Your faith, if you're a Christian, you were willing to go to the death. But now, if you're a Christian, that's when you got hooked.
Yes.
Yes.
But we have to remember that doesn't mean there were no hardcore
Right.
wonderful, right. But it's very much like our lives here in America today. It costs us very little to be Christians. Honestly. I don't think I've ever lost out on anything because I'm a Christian. I've had a couple of really awkward conversations, but I didn't not get into a school or not get a job because I'm a Christian. I've never really even been dissed because of it. You know what I mean? I've never really even been insulted, maybe mildly as a child. And it costs us little. And so the American church tends to be pretty lukewarm, honestly. We're not willing to do much for God. And I say we hugely collectively, not necessarily any of you in this room, okay? It makes a difference what you're putting on the line for what you believe. Which is why the church father Tertullian famously said that the blood of the martyrs is seed. He said it's like the seed of the church. It plants the church. Somehow persecution intensifies people's devotion and also sets an example for others. dang, these people are willing to die for it. I'm gonna check it out because they've got something amazing. Okay, so like I said, if some of you are coming to my house next week, if you're not, totally fine. If you stop now, that's fine. But if you want to listen in on the rest of our discussion, because we're going to discuss the second part this week, and the rest of the Book of the Ancient Romans, I'll record my classes next Tuesday for the next 2 weeks, and you can watch if you want to. And if you don't, it's fine. Or if you just want to finish reading, I think you have about 25 pages left in the Dorothy Mills book, maybe 30 pages. You could just finish reading the book if you want to find out how it ends. But let's spend the rest of our time talking about the Eagle of the Night. We might end up starting a little early, but I also wanted to show you that animated, I just shut my computer off, and then I'm going to show you that animated map of the empire expanding and contracting. So, Marcus is never going to be a soldier again. You ever heard stories? All my life I've heard stories in sports, people in sports. You get a football scholarship or whatever, and then you have a devastating injury. It's over. It's done. There will be no sports future for you. And a lot of times people just cave in. They just become so depressed. This was the whole plan for my life, and I don't have a plan B, and I don't know how to do anything else. And they get so upset and depressed that they give in. Does Marcus just get depressed and give in?
No.
No. He jumps on this chance, doesn't he? To go look for this lost eagle. Do they have any real evidence? What is their evidence that there's an eagle somewhere up there in the north, in what we call Scotland? What's the evidence? What? A story. Somebody told a story that some group somewhere says they may or may not have a Roman eagle. This is not a real strong basis for an expedition. But Marcus jumps on it. Why do you think he's so eager to go? What does he want to get out of it?
He has faith in people.
Can you expound? That's a very interesting. I want to know more. Please expound on that statement.
My real answer is he basically he has a strong respect for the Roman army, and he probably wants to leave the spot where he's stationed.
Okay.
I would.
He
Sure.
really does have a lot of respect for the Roman army. His dad was in the army. He's in the army. As far as we can tell at the beginning, he intends to be career military.
It's his dad's eagle.
And it's his dad's eagle. That's the other thing.
What? They deal with eagles.
They
You know-
represent something good.
Hey, Rhett, have you ever read and I know you have, medieval battles, okay, any battles, and the soldiers are always holding the standard or the flag, even Civil War, American Civil War. It's like, don't let our regiment flag hit the ground. Don't let it go, because this is our rallying point. This is a symbol of us. And I think maybe we who are not military might not know what that feels like, to have something that this is the symbol of us. This is the spirit. This is not in a weird way if they're worshiping it, but this is a sign of us. And we don't want to lose it. We don't want to disgrace ourselves. This is us. And the Roman standards were like that. And so we find out in the book that if you lose the eagle, you can't reform allegiance, right? But if you recover the eagle, you can. Did I show you this picture? Augustus built an altar of peace. All right, I didn't bring in the altar of peace picture. Because, he brought peace to the Roman Empire, Pax Romana, and he dedicated an altar to it. And it's covered with pictures, all right? And he's, you know what? It wasn't, I'm sorry. It's not the altar of peace, it's a statue of Augustus, and it's the breastplate. And the breastplate of the statue is all decorated. And it's a Roman standard being returned from the Parthians. The Parthians have captured it and it's being returned. In other words, Augustus has a statue of himself made, and it's so important, this event, that they recovered the Roman standard. He has it put on the statue. Does that make sense? I'm sorry, for a minute I thought it was on that altar piece, but it wasn't.
Didn't the code on pictures like on it, like the actual color? I didn't have like pictures or symbols on
In addition to the writing,
it. Yeah,
I don't know, I don't remember.
because I'm pretty sure it did.
And is this connected? Do you think there are pictures of like a military symbol?
Yeah, it's probably. If there are, I'm pretty sure there are. And if there actually is, then that's what we have like symbols of military around there and government or whatever.
Mhm.
The
So I think that's it. But we just mentioned that this is his dad's eagle. Okay. What do people, I don't even know how to say this. When we're really, really little, our parents are everything to us, you know. But as you get older, sometimes you find out that your parents aren't perfect. Maybe you've already discovered this. I'm sorry, I love it. And you know, so Marcus last saw his dad. Marcus last saw his dad when he was a little boy. This was a long time ago that this happened, right? And my dad, my wonderful dad, was strong, he's a Roman soldier. And so what are the rumors about that legion? What do people say about that ninth legion sometimes? Throughout the beginning of the book, it's like, oh, it's the ninth legion. Not only the fact that they were lost, but there was something else. Did you catch the rumors? Kind of an undercurrent of how do people feel about that legion?
Oh yeah, it had like a bad reputation. It was like a dishonest, and they wanted to like his dad wanted to restore the name.
Yes. That legion had a bad reputation for being, there's some places in the book that say rotten. Just a rotten. And of course, Marcus doesn't want to, it's his dad's legion. Do you see what I mean? And he's a little boy. Nothing my dad was connected with could be bad in any way. My dad would never do anything bad. And so he wants to know, right? I want that legion, I want that eagle so they can reform the legion. It's my dad's legion. But I also want to confirm that my dad is a good man. So he takes the guy up on the offer. Yeah, I'll go north. I'll sneak up there. But he has to do something first. So, remember they have a wolf cub? And in chapter 9, this happens. Abruptly, the Romans stooped to unbuckle the heavy bronze-studded collar from the wolf's neck. Cub was full grown now, though not yet come to his full strength, and the time had arrived when he must have his choice of returning to the wild. You could tame a wild thing, but never count it as truly one, until, being free to return to its own kind, it chose to come back to you. Marcus had known that all along, and he and Esca had made their preparations with infinite care, bringing Cub to this spot again and again, that he might be sure of the way home if he wished to take it. And they let Cub go. What does Cub do eventually? Did you read? Okay. He came back. He came back. He came to the house. The reason I read that is because I asked you when you left last week, I asked you to think about how Esca and Cub are similar. How are Esca and Cub similar? What do they have in common? Well, why did Eska even have the opportunity to come back? What did Marcus do? Marcus gave Eska the same opportunity. What did Marcus do for Eska before they left?
These are the things you know.
He set him free. Eska's a slave. He bought him. Eska looked up from the papyrus and shook his head. Capitals are one thing, he said, but I can make nothing of the script. What is it? Your manumission, your freedom, Marcus said. I made it out this evening. Eska looked down to the thing in his hands once more and again back to Marcus, as though he was not sure that he understood. Then he let the roll spring back on itself and said very slowly, I am free? Free to go? Yes, Marcus said, free to go, Eska. There was a long, dragging silence. An owl cried somewhere afar off, with a note that seemed at once desolate and mocking. Cub looked from one to the other and whined softly in his throat. Then Eska said, is it that you are sending me away? No, it is for you to go or stay as you wish. He did the same thing, right? That he did with Cub. Because, now this is back to my question, how are Eska and Cub the same? What do they have in common? They both have a choice, but what state were they in before?
Oh, they were like enslaved, and they were not the
They were both owned. What were they before they were owned? What was Eska's life before he was captured? What was Cub's life like before he was captured? What kind of lives would they both have led? Imagine Eska's life if he never got captured. Can you picture it? And the Romans never attacked? Would he live in a proper Roman house? In a well laid out town? He'd be free. Be a little wild, wouldn't he? What would Cub be like? He'd be free and wild. They both got tamed a little bit, but then they had to let him go, you know? Because, like you said with the Cub, it's not yours unless it has a chance to go and comes back to its own free will. He said, I can't take you. This is probably a suicide mission. For all we know. I can't force a slave to go with me on this. I can bring a friend. But I can't force a slave. Yes.
I wonder if, like, I can see what he's saying, like, when he like, you love me, or you telling the heart to me, but, like, I can totally see how, like, because I wasn't really sure, you know, like, was he, like, trying to say, was he kind of, like, dumbfounded, but what was actually happening?
Yes.
He said, like, you want me to leave? Or if he was after, like, I could tell it was just like, no way, you actually way I can go to work. Did I do something wrong? You know, I could tell.
Could it be both?
Yeah.
Could it be a moment? Yes. Some of you, maybe not. Did anybody in this room read Till We Have Faces by Stevenson? No. Because that would have been before. That would have been 2 years ago.
I'm kind of going through reading C.S. Lewis books. I'll get there.
Okay. I'm sorry. There's a similar slave set free. Yeah. You know what? Here, imagine this, Rhett. Imagine you have finally made up your mind that you're going to spend the rest of your life as a slave. You become okay with that because you're in a pretty good position. But suddenly you have the opportunity to go home. But in the meantime, you love the person that you're serving. And there's that moment of, I could go back and everything could be the same, but then it hits you, but this person is my friend. I don't want to go back. It made me think of Aluga a little bit in Cat of Basties. You know, would he, okay, if the cat hadn't been killed, would he have gone home? His family's dead. It's a risky business because he's the true king, but are they gonna welcome him? And he could have just made up his mind to live out his life, and I think he wouldn't have had a bad life, frankly. They're in that household where they were good to him until disaster at the household. And I think Scott feels the same way. Does that make sense to you guys? That you could kind of want both at the same time and not be sure which one you want.
Hard to fix it, but I feel like it's a little bit different. Like, I'm not saying it's a place that can be treated like birthday thing, but they weren't like, abused that much.
Yeah, from like for that, from the majority of the accounts that we have seen, they were like, but I mean, I'm sure they were still using some kind of.
Sure.
I mean,
But I can't see Marcus beating Eska ever. Like, they started out as friends, honestly. Don't you think that they never really had that relationship? So they head north and they meet Gurn. We talked about it. He's got the Mithras scar on his forehead and the chin strap. And he realizes who he is. And Marcus gets some bad news. What was his dad's legion like? It wasn't good. Bunches of them deserted and mutinied. But not his dad. Finally, they find where the eagle is. And I didn't notice this. You don't notice this the first time you read the book. But at the very first page, very first chapter, Marcus is on his way to his first command. And it describes him, and it says, it was a busy road and saw many travelers. Traders with bronze weapons and raw yellow amber in their ponies' packs. Country folk driving shaggy cattle or lean pigs from village to village. Sometimes a band of tawny-haired tribesmen from farther west. Strolling harbors and quack oculists, too. Or a light-stepping hunter with a huge wolfhound at his heels. This is exactly the sort of life that Marcus is going to live with Eska, and he's going to be one of these quack oculists, kind of a fake eye doctor. They finally locate the place where the eagle is. And you remember the old guy who's kind of grumpy? He's grumpy, and he rubs toes fat, and his grandson's eyes or whatever, because apparently that helps eyes. He's very grumpy, but he befriends Marcus. They get to sit at the ceremony, and he's sitting next to this old guy. And the old guy's drinking a little bit, He's being really free with information. So Marcus decides to pump him for a little more information and finds out he was there when his dad's legion got wiped out. And what does the guy have on his hand? The old man, old grumpy man. What's he wearing? Do you remember? I'm worried that we don't remember any of these things, quite frankly.
Marcus is like in the homeschool kid that went out and for the first time. What was my dad's bad like?
What? Yes. All right, I'm never gonna find it. Okay, hold on, it says a banquet after, I want to read it.
I give you money.
Okay, I can't find it, I give up. The guy is wearing the ring from his dad's hand. He's wearing his dad's family signet ring that Marcus last saw when his dad shipped out that last time. This old man helped kill his dad. And here's the most amazing part of this book to me. He keeps it together for the rest of the feast. Because he can't let it slip. He can't let anything slip. Marcus can't. He can't tip his hand. He's got to be known. Oh, that's nice. And inside he's thinking, I'm going to rip that ring off that guy's finger, go grab that eagle and get out of here. He's got to play it cool. And Marcus is good at what he does. Yeah, right.
Was it like, was that like just like a baby thing? The guy had the ring, kind of like the shield or armor or whatever, and
Was it Hector stripped off?
Yeah.
The armor of Achilles off the necklace, yes.
with any kind of like that.
Yeah, or just, you got a cool ring and I want it, and you're dead.
I didn't know if it was.
I mean, you're not using it anymore.
I didn't know if it was like a.
But no, I'm sure that in this case, it's a bit of a trophy. It's a bit of a trophy. And sure, taking away your opponent's accoutrements or jewelry would be appropriate. Yeah, it's appropriate, that they would think it's appropriate. All right, we're gonna stop so I can show you really quick this animated thing, because I think it's really cool. So for you guys, if you come to my house, just finish everything as much as you can. But I'm gonna tell you everything anyway when you come, so it's fine. There will be spoilers. Okay,